Munachi's narrative part 4. Munachi visited her father later that evening of her arrival. She prepared herself for a formidable challenge. He was still alive. When she arrived, the smell of the meal filled the house and touched her senses, showing that dinner was being made. Looking at her antagonists was upsetting. She should face this dilemma head-on. The years of pain caused by her father's words kept haunting her. Munachi carried the burden of sorrow all her life. Munachi remembered her children standing beside her. She looked at them, touched their faces, and smiled. Despite her father's destructive words, she grieved because there were moments of joy. She remembered the good memories, which helped soften her pain. Would she grant forgiveness to the man who inflicted her deepest wounds? She inhaled deeply and then exhaled slowly to regulate her emotions. Following a prolonged period of absence characterized by physical and psychological distress, she refrained from embracing anyone, as such an act was traditionally an expression of affection. However, she didn't harbor such sentiments towards anyone, including her young siblings, who were innocent in this context. Instead, she extended courteous greetings to all. "Good evening, everyone." They escorted her to her father's room. As Munachi proceeded to his room, her heart pounded within her chest. She experienced a mixture of fear and resilience. He was laying down motionless, with his eyes closed. She stood before his bed, holding each child's hands, gazing at him in deep silence and distress as Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar did when they visited him during the darkest period in his life. Her father remained motionless, with shallow breaths. She closed her eyes and quietly expressed her thoughts. The series of events accelerated. The chaos of voices and occurrences caused disorder within her mind. The memories stirred were akin to poison ivy. She clenched her fists, her face showed anger and confusion. Munachi inhaled and exhaled, perspiration beading on her forehead. She bit her lower lip to organize her thoughts and feelings. She said softly, "I can do all things through him who strengthens me." After a moment, she informed her father of her presence with her children and asked him to open his eyes and look at them. It was reported that he had not opened his eyes for several days, but he did. He was unable to speak but gazed at her for several seconds, his eyes scanning from one child to another, so he knew Munachi and her children had come to visit him on his deathbed. His family was astonished by this brief but significant change he made. Tears streamed from the corners of his eyes. Perhaps he longed to see Munachi before his demise. He wanted to apologize, perhaps to clear any confusion or misunderstanding. She looked at him with unease in his transitional state. Her heart was torn to witness the strong man she once knew in such a condition, wilted and moribund. A complex interplay of love and hatred, delight and resentment, confusion and control, sorrow and elation, anger and delight permeated her mind due to her inability to communicate her feelings to him. Had she done so, he might have perished before her eyes, a burden she was unwilling to bear. To her, those feelings were justified and unyielding. She would not let them see her responsiveness to what some of them had done to her. She felt the love burning in her heart. She wanted to tell him she loved and hated him, but the words were imprisoned. Seeing his tears, could she have judged him unfairly? No. He hit her, she lost consciousness. He could have killed her. He wished her death. He caused all her suffering. The wreckage, or the remnants of his creation, stood before him, resilient as a diamond pillar that held through it all. It is possible that both Munachi and her father petitioned the divine to sustain his life so they could bid farewell. She silently embraced him, held her children's hands, and then departed. He passed away in the morning, the day following her arrival, as she had requested of God that she could see her father before his demise. At least, God answered her prayer. Following the interment of their father, Munachi sought to re-establish contact with her siblings. They were very young at the time of her departure, and had not communicated since. In all honesty, her siblings were blameless and simply living in the house with their parents. Munachi's stepmother and her first child with another man had caused Munachi distress. This was not her siblings' fault. The woman and her daughter were to blame. Her daughter was deceitful, displaying false tears and venomous accusations. However, someone informed Munachi that one of her siblings asserted they didn't know her and that she was not part of their family. She believed her previous perceptions to be accurate, which led her to sustain her distance, and the sense of indignation worsened. For lack of wood, the fire goes out, and where there is no whisperer, quarreling ceases. Proverbs chapter 26 verse 20. If the gossiper had kept quiet, Munachi might have had a chance to reconnect with her half-siblings and the other half-sibling, depending on whether both sides wanted reconciliation. One side accepted her, but the other side rejected her. The child she left was a stranger to her. He quickly established a strong connection with his siblings. Their interactions were exceptional. He introduced them to his friends and said that he was proud of them. Regrettably, Munachi continued to be emotionally distant and was unable to communicate or establish a connection with him in her capacity as his mother. She regarded herself as an outsider and a stranger rather than his mother. She regretted the day she was told not to try to communicate with him. Munachi silently bore this pain. She screamed inwardly, but her cries went unheard. The profound desire to embrace and kiss her child, to express maternal love, wasn't there, as the child's adoptive mother instructed her to cease calling. Consequently, she was unable to engage in maternal interaction with him. Not only was she detached from her first child, but all her children suffered because they didn't feel close to her, missing out on sharing stories about their grandparents and the past, to build a genuine connection. The past was too traumatized to share with her children. Munachi and her son had dialogues, yet there was no warmth. She felt entirely numb toward everyone. She reflected on her experiences of motherhood at that same age, recalling her feelings of rejection and solitude when her father denied her even the right to life. He was, at the very least, not being exchanged for monetary gain or a position as they did her. She nodded thoughtfully, considering the possibility that they might have mistreated him and concealed it as they did with her. She blinked back tears, not because she was recalling her past, but because she was experiencing his emotions. She reflected on it and resolved that they would not behave like that at home. It was merely her imagination, since everyone thought the individual who had traded her was a favorite of the family. Turning her face, she watched her children playing together. Overcome with emotions, she wished to embrace them affectionately but found it challenging to do so. Several years ago, when she called, she was informed that the child was in good health, needed nothing, and was advised to cease further contact, and instructed to forget about him, but without considering the broader implications. Was it necessary or appropriate to deny a mother access to her child? Consequently, there were no contacts, interactions, or expressions of affection for her son. Rather, there was complete alienation, silence, estrangement, and pain that rendered her stoic and left the child dispirited and unloved. While the adoptive parents were alive, the child was okay. Now that both had deceased, questions arose regarding Munachi's relationship with him. She felt as though she had received a dose of anesthesia. She despised this emotional numbness that persisted. She was uncertain about the prospect of establishing a relationship with her son. She feared causing him additional pain, and vice versa. One of Munachi's most shocking discoveries was that a couple of years after the death of her son's adoptive mother, his paternal grandmother informed her grandchild that Munachi was his biological mother, and her son was the father. The child heard the name but was unaware that Munachi was his biological mother, but a relative. He was flabbergasted. He sobbed uncontrollably because they had hidden such important information from him. That shouldn't surprise Munachi, since they ordered her not to contact him. They would never reveal the truth if the grandmother hadn't told him. Munachi examined and re-examined herself. and examined the intention of those individuals who hurt her. She saw the family member who raped her, but never said hello. He was a rapist, she didn't want any conversation with him. She was lost, drowning in a sea of hurtful memories, and didn't know how to rise above them. Her resentment was so persistent that it hardened her heart even more than before, especially after she saw the man who had sexually assaulted her. The day of Munachi and her 2 children's departure, she encountered a profound emotional moment at the airport. The children embraced each other, they were reluctant to part. It was a heartbreaking moment for her. Her emotions escalated, she diverted her gaze and struggled to suppress tears that threatened to emerge. They ultimately streamed down her cheeks. She was unable to determine the cause. She finally allowed herself to feel her full emotions. She was uncertain whether the tears stemmed from the fact that she was parted from her first son or from the fact that all 3 of her children, who had quickly developed a close bond, now faced separation. She silently embraced all her children, took the hands of the youngest, and commenced to walk away. As he looked at Munachi, he asked about the time of their reunion. Upon returning from her father's funeral, Munachi fell into a melancholia and had migraines with nausea. She was fragile and aloof at times, she didn't refuse to forgive, didn't know how, and neither did she seek help. Seated on the armchair with her eyes wide open, she gazed without truly seeing, holding the television remote in her hand, aimlessly flipping through channels, immersing in self-pity. A preacher with a powerful voice stated, "Know your worth in the eyes of God." Suddenly, she stopped surfing the channels. The preacher proceeded, "When life knocks you down, do not surrender. Invoke your God to grant you strength to rise, brush off the dust, remain resilient amidst life's adversities, and ascend. Obstacles will be encountered along your journey, however, these shall serve to enhance your strength, endurance, and faith in God. He is ever present, especially in times of need. Your obligation is merely to present your concerns to Him. Trust in His support, as He has provided for me and numerous others." Apostle Paul stated, "When I am weak, then I am strong." 2 Cor. 12:10. The preacher shared some of his extensive experiences with God, which gave Munachi hope. Her face illuminated in response to his testimonies. Before retiring for the evening, she offered a prayer to the Lord, seeking wisdom on steps to improve her emotions. She resolved to open her heart and appeal to God for assistance in overcoming adversities. She examined the scars, one on her eyebrow, another on her elbow, and another on her chin, smiling as she reflected that these were souvenirs from Boaz. How could she forget his cruelties? Initially, her pleas to God were conveyed through deep breaths and groans. Subsequently, she was able to articulate her concerns to God, thereby gaining the strength to confront her difficulties. The first action she took was to document her experiences. She sat scrutinizing the laptop's screen, contemplating whether she could find the strength to write. Perhaps that would help alleviate her mental state. One day, Munachi visited a large department store and noticed a bookcase filled with religious books and Bibles. Impulsively, she took one home. It remained on her bedside table. Her thoughts were overwhelming. Emotionally drained, she instinctively reached for the Bible and opened it. Her eyes landed on Psalm chapter 147, verse 3, which stated, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." She continued reading until verse 5, which states, "He determines the numbers of the stars. He gives to all of them their names. Great is our Lord, and abundant in power. His understanding is beyond measure." Nodding in acknowledgement, she examined the verses carefully and repeated, "He heals the brokenhearted." Her heart was shattered into fragmented pieces. She prayed that God might restore not only her heart but her entire life. Munachi endeavored to establish a relationship with her son, however, it proved to be futile. The child perceived a lack of love from his mother. As a consequence, he experienced a range of other emotions. Munachi assumed full responsibility for her son's sentiments. Before the demise of his adoptive parents, she ought to have exerted greater effort to maintain a relationship with him. Her child's emotions were unrestrained, his expressions were conveyed so openly and unguardedly that she was taken aback, yet his reasons were well-founded. His apparent disapproval of Munachi may stem from undisclosed reasons underpinning her emotional withdrawal and frustration. No one truly comprehended her struggles. A few venomous words Munachi's father said to her not only devastated her emotionally but also adversely affected his grandchildren. She abhorred remaining in that prison called memory, even when she attempted to escape from that confinement. She was desperate to escape the emotional confinement, to share her life's story with her children, and to convey her true feelings, but their conclusion to her narrative silenced her. What if they judged her parents more harshly than she had? The children didn't deserve her burdens, trials, shame, unfulfilled possibilities, but they deserved a peace of mind, something she had never known. According to the good book, God could perform miracles, she was waiting for hers. Her frustration grew even more, and her mind turned into a necropolis. One day, her melancholia kept her in bed, she couldn't go to work. She reached out to her employer to let them know about her health issues. Her mind was drained, and her body was exhausted, keeping her confined to her bed. She didn't sleep all night, she stayed still. Hours later, she got up and went to the bathroom to shower. When she finished, she looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her face looked exhausted and older. How much longer would she keep trapping herself with those endless thoughts? Would she keep going like that? And how long would she last? She wore the memories like a noose, in a moment, they could strangle her. Her antagonists were gone, but she was still suffering. Reaching for moisturizer, she applied it to her face and then said, "Munachi, you can't die like this. Without God, you will be adrift." Because of her intensified emotional states, she collapsed to her knees, and she couldn't breathe. Her psyche could no longer withstand the pressure, as if a ferocious entity was roaring within her. She couldn't reconcile her past and her present, they were too complex. Her life was chaotic, and her suffering seemed endless. She crouched in a corner of her bedroom, holding her knees as she reflected on her past, but she did not cry. She reproached herself for being so unforgiving and let her traumas control her thoughts. Growing increasingly angry and frustrated, she exclaimed, "Oh, God. Please, rescue me." Afterward, no more words were spoken, only moans. Of course, she could have fought the silent monster inside her, but she was too burdened to fight, no willpower, so she gave in. How could she let herself become so deeply devastated and unsettled? One of Munachi's children often claimed that she was hiding secrets from them, if only they knew how many secrets she'd been keeping. Their mother found it difficult to explain with diplomacy the hardships she had faced, the physical and emotional abuse she endured, the harsh words, and the scars she still carried. She prayed to God and said that her heart had been numb for many years because she was hurting too deeply. She sought refuge and begged for God's compassion. She felt indifferent, her emotional turmoil was overwhelming. She didn't want to stay that way and longed to feel again because her children were suffering, too. They needed their mother's affection, which they lacked. Moreover, she didn't want to die in that condition. Her heart ached, her mind spun. If she died, then what would happen? Her soul would be lost. She prayed and read the scriptures daily, hoping that the day would come soon when she would feel normal again. Munachi received a call from a concerned relative. However, she was already feeling distressed, and the caller's words worsened her emotional state. The relative criticized Munachi's behavior toward the family and her son. Today was especially tough for her, it was the date of her father's traumatic words. She closed her eyes and chose to step back from the conversation. She needed her own space, tranquility, and privacy to grieve. These were essential for calming her turbulent thoughts. Without them, she risked losing control, as her mind was already in chaos. They were unaware of her past and were unable to understand her experiences or ongoing struggles. Munachi's cousin borrowed the phrase from John Donne, "No man is an island." She listened and reflected on it, recalling the same sentiment herself. Therefore, the family members formed a continent, so each is a part of the whole. However, she was exiled from there years ago and was told not to make contact. Her cousin told her, isolation wasn't good. Nonetheless, Munachi had practiced isolation in exile. While her cousin spoke, Munachi frowned in retrospect. She strolled back on her journey, which had been long. The paths were arduous and dangerous, going as far as her recollection took her. Her cousin's voice was inaudible as Munachi traveled. She trekked barefoot, steps unmeasured, bleeding along the way. Her face changed, and she tumbled because the memories were immortal. Friedrich Nietzsche said, "That which does not kill us makes us stronger." However, in Munachi's case, each day, she experienced a gradual decline in her mental strength. Each day. Over time, her heart was hardened by grief and became increasingly resistant to matters concerning her family members. Although it was long ago, the hidden truth, the suffering she endured, her father's actions, and their words led to a lasting estrangement from her family, including her relatives, even her maternal family, whom she considered strangers. Due to her parents' neglect, she suffered abuse from both family members and strangers. Her relatives thought she was insane for being uncomfortably unfriendly and avoiding their questions. They could think whatever they wished, still, they didn't hear the music they played and told her to dance to the tunes. They didn't endure what she endured, nor see what she had seen, nor visit places she was forced to visit. If she attempted to speak, they would see her frustration and would not believe her narrative. She chose to stay silent and keep to herself to hide her shame. Her cousin kept talking, but Munachi was stuck in the past until they called her name. Part of her wanted to share her pain with her cousin, but instead, she spoke casually, "I thank you for reaching out. We'll talk later, bye." Then she ended the call. She closed her eyes in silent anguish, remembering the day she ran to Boaz for safety and promised herself she would never let them exploit her again. Boaz, in turn, did the same. She wished she were an orphan, unaware of her parents and relatives. If strangers had caused her suffering, she might have understood, since she wasn't related to them. The truth could no longer be hidden, because it burned inside her. It might lead to her eternal ruin or push her to madness. But who could she turn to? Her past was too shameful to speak aloud. She remained silent, yet she was not mute, oppressed, yet she endured. Munachi believed that, before her death, despite the potential pain her stories might cause others, she should share them to free her troubled mind. Exhausted from work, Munachi placed her handbag on the love seat and sank into the armchair. She contemplated how to express her feelings to her children. Her past was filled with degradation, misery, and ongoing indignation, which at times influenced her children. Overcome with despair, she shouted, "Oh, Lord, help me. Open my heart and mind, help me find my voice to express the truth to free myself. Slough off unwanted thoughts and feelings. I don't want to hold on to them any longer." She dropped to her knees in frustration, but she said nothing else, only sobs. She was hurting even more because her actions had hurt her children. She couldn't process the pain and couldn't give the love her children needed. Certainly, if she had been resilient, she would have fought the silent uproar uprising within her, but she couldn't. Her son's presence was constantly on her mind. However, the crushing words and wounds she carried kept her from making contact. The suffering both had experienced was like hell. She believed she would die young, which mentally paralyzed her and kept her from planning for the future. As a result, she lost years of productivity that could have secured her and her children's future, but her life kept going in circles. She endured starvation, neglect, sexual assault, trafficking, and both physical and emotional abuse. Her story stayed hidden from others, yet they dismissed her suffering by calling her bold, aloof, and uncaring. They failed to grasp the extent of her mental exhaustion because they hadn't traveled the same distances or walked her paths filled with shattered glass, fire, blizzards, hail, venomous snakes, and navigational confusion. The most dangerous part was the unattended wounds she had sustained during her journey, which later became infected. She wanted to explain to her children why she seemed distant. She was afraid of hurting them. The reason was that she was trapped in a cycle of pain, unable to break free and be where she needed to be with her children. Feeling guilty about her emotional instability, she became upset with herself. Whenever her daughter mentioned hidden secrets from her past, Munachi would walk away silently because she couldn't refute or rebuke her daughter's claims. Munachi inspected the damage caused during and after the tornadoes. If only she could motivate herself to clear the paths after the major storms had passed, things would be different for her and her children. She married twice with preconceived notions that it wouldn't work, and it didn't. All her concerns focused on her children. She had been thinking about ways to strengthen her bond with them. Munachi, shaking her head, sat upright with her legs crossed, reflecting on the unforgettable treatment she had received. She always believed that her numbness helped her avoid feeling upset when she was pushed because she was already at the bottom of the pit. Her mind was in turmoil as she fought with her protests, pleas, and laments over their betrayal. They voiced their demands. When she refused, they forced her to comply. When she returned, she would scrub her skin until it was raw and discolored. To summarize, Munachi endured abuse from those who were supposed to protect her, but they utilized brutal methods to dehumanize her. She silently bore the pain and resolved never to let such exploitation happen again. Then, she quickly went to Boaz, who also abused her. Relatives had invited her to a gathering, but she declined. She was socially awkward, standoffish, and even cold. If she had gone, she might have spoken the truth at the event. The truth could sometimes be harsh. She chose to revive her story, avoided naming names, and tried to hide sensitive details by using metaphors while hinting at some experiences she had gone through. Tears streamed down her face as she recalled the scenes with the man in the hotel parking lot. She never knew what they had rented her body for. Maybe she was handed over to his manager to get a position or a promotion. Munachi stood quietly in front of a mirror after a shower, gazing at herself and contemplating her stoic attitude. Looking at herself, she saw someone who appeared haunted by demonic events. She was overwhelmed with self-reproach, saying that she didn't recognize or like the person she was and that she wasn't the person she wanted to be. She admitted she didn't know how to change herself, and she expressed this through tears. A few months later, she began to build a relationship with her son and her siblings. They began talking casually. Their conversations became more natural over time. By God's grace, he shared his experiences with her more calmly. It was a mountain they had to climb together because it was essential for their healing and to build a stronger relationship. Munachi acknowledged her role in his misery and apologized. One day, while talking with her brother, he told her that her son needed her help to heal. Something shook inside her. She said with a shaky voice, "I'm trying, but if I can't help myself, how am I supposed to help someone else?" She sat, scrutinizing the laptop's screen, wondering if she could find the strength to do what needed to be done. Then she began to exhume the traumatic experiences from her graveyard mind to display on the screen. Tears welled up in her eyes, then they streamed down her cheeks as she continued to unearth the buried memories. She didn't stop to wipe her eyes before looking at the screen. She didn't need to see it because her fingers moved easily on the keyboard, and she didn't want to break her flow as she wrote. She finished with, "People who don't know your story might choose their adjectives to make you feel worse, because they have no idea how you feel or the roots of the problems that desensitized your heart." Moreover, quietness wasn't weakness, but it's simply survival. She went to bed and woke up from a dream that deeply shook her and brought her to her knees. In her dream, she saw the Lord, Jesus Christ, on the horizon. The world seemed to disappear except for her and the Lord. Because of his glorious nature, she couldn't see his face, but he was dressed majestically. Without a doubt, she knew it was the Lord. Then she wondered if she was ready to meet Jesus. That was her reckoning. She then decided to seek help from the Lord, asking for forgiveness for her steadfast frustration, fasting, and praying on a burlap cloth. She also sought professional help and realized that talking to a therapist would give her the necessary tools for recovery. After a few sessions, Munachi felt lighter. The burden of her past started to fade, and she learned to cope and found ways to manage her thoughts and emotions effectively. Munachi stood up, crossed her arms in front of a large window, and smiled. Then she decided to head outside through the garage. She liked all seasons, but she had favored spring since childhood without knowing why. She initially thought it was the fresh air, but she eventually realized it was more than that. Watching the leaves' morphogenesis on the trees, spring now symbolized a new beginning to her. It's her springtime now. Thank you for watching.